What's up, college football addicts? Today we are taking a look at the Florida schedule, and I know it's the toughest in the country. I'm going to talk to you guys about where you should be betting and which way you should bet when you look at this schedule. This UF schedule preview is presented by BetUS. We'll talk more about them in just a moment. Now, it is well documented that this is the toughest schedule in the country. Honestly, one of the toughest schedules I've ever seen that the Gators have to play against this year, and certainly not one for the faint of heart. Certainly not one that Gator fans are maybe even looking forward to that much. I've seen some comments about Graham Mertz saying like we're competitors, we want this schedule. But man, in year 3 under Napier, it does not get any tougher than this. Again, the toughest schedule in the country. Here's what I will say about the schedule is that it looks tough right now, but it looks tough because of preseason rankings. And every year, the AP poll, the coaches poll, the different polls that come out, they overrank teams. And teams that you thought were going to be better end up being worse, and teams you thought were going to be worse end up being better. And so Florida's schedule looks really tough right now. But Florida fans, if I was to tell you that Miami flopped, right? They lose to you guys, they lose to Virginia Tech, they lose to Louisville, they lose to Florida State, they lose on the road at Georgia Tech again, and they finish 7-5, right? You wouldn't be shocked by that. Miami does that most years over the last couple of decades. And then that Miami game that you thought was so tough early doesn't become as impressive of a win, right? What about Texas A&M? They start in the top 20. Well, they fired their coach last year, and they're installing a brand new system with a brand new coach. So A&M has a very tough schedule as well. They play Texas, they play Florida, they obviously play a lot of other really good SEC teams, and A&M could finish this year unranked. And if you beat A&M early, that's obviously going to be a really good win for you early, especially if Notre Dame somehow loses to them. But A&M could finish with 5 or 6 or 7 losses as well. And if Miami finishes with 5 or more losses, if A&M finishes with 7 or so losses, that takes a couple of the ranked teams off your schedule. And you look at that beginning part of the schedule and you say, man, Florida should really start 5-0. If Miami's not a good team, they should beat Samford. Texas A&M's not a good team. They should beat Mississippi State, and they should beat UCF as well. Would it surprise anybody if Tennessee had another 8-4 or 7-5 year? I know that's being looked at as an automatic loss for Florida, but is it? Is it an automatic loss? Tennessee, man, they haven't been able to beat Florida with any consistency for a long time. Now, the schedule gets a lot tougher after that with Kentucky, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State. But this schedule looks really, really tough right now. We may find out later it wasn't as tough as we thought, or our thoughts about how tough this schedule could be confirmed if Miami has the year we think they're capable of, if Texas A&M lives up to expectations, if UCF competes for a Big 12 championship, if Tennessee finally puts it all together. Let's go ahead and break the schedule down. When you look at that Miami game week 1, if you watched our Miami preview, maybe you already know what's coming here, but man, I have a really tough time with the injuries and the question marks that Florida has seeing them win this game. Now, I know the Swamp is a heck of a beast, and I know that it is very tough to play there, and I think this is going to be one of the most lit crowds you've ever seen. I think for a fan base that has watched their team lose more games than they have won over the last 3 years, you'd think there'd be a little bit of a subdued atmosphere. Not this year, not with Miami starting it out. Now, if this was Samford in game 1, I don't even know if it would sell out. But with Miami coming in week 1, I think the Swamp will be absolutely on fire. That said, I have a tough time imagining that with a bruised up defensive line, you lose Jamari Lyons and a running back room that lost its best 2 running backs from last year, one to a short-term injury, one to your biggest rival in the Georgia Bulldogs, and then a quarterback coming off of an injury, an offensive line that's got a lot of question marks per all accounts there in Gainesville. I have a tough time thinking that Florida could find a way to beat Miami. Now, it's certainly possible, and I'm not telling you that it's an automatic Miami win, but right now, I think I'm leaning Miami towards winning this game. There are a few caveats. If the Swamp can take over and really make Cam Ward look pretty pedestrian, if Graham Mertz can outduel Cam Ward and kind of show us some things that we didn't see last year from a pushing the ball down the field perspective. Obviously, Mertz did a really good job in the short to intermediate game, but can he kind of push the ball downfield against a really weak Miami secondary? Can the offensive line answer the questions we have about it? If all of those things happen, then I do think that Florida can get the win here, especially playing at home in the Swamp where it will be lit. But as of right now, I lean Miami to win this game. Vegas, you can go to BetUS right now and see that Miami is a favorite in this game. Vegas likes Miami to win it as well. Then I think Florida does get back on the right track. And I think they get back on the right track in a really good way. I think they beat Samford. They beat the absolute tar out of them. They take a lot of frustration out from the Miami game on Samford. And I think they beat Texas A&M as well. Maybe that's a little bit of a hot take, but I think playing at home is a big deal. I think the fact that, A&M, as I mentioned earlier, new coach, new scheme, new system, a lot of turnover there. It's early in the year. That's a tough place to have to go play early in the year for a team that's not been together for a long time with a brand new coach, brand new staff. I think Florida gets the win against Texas A&M as well. And then I think they beat Mississippi State. Mississippi State, I think, Jeff Lebby, I think the world of him. I don't think that they can win this. I think even with Florida's road problems, Mississippi State is not enough talent, can't keep up, probably going to be one of the worst teams in the SEC. Obviously, Vandy will be up there as well, but Mississippi State going to struggle this year, going to kind of be in that Arkansas tier, pretty far down at the bottom of the conference. And so I think they get the win here. They're 3-1 after the loss to Miami. Then they play UCF. UCF, not a gimme, not a pushover team by any means, but I think they beat UCF as well. Now, KJ Jefferson ran all over them last year. I think Florida plays that better this year. I think they don't get as exposed because they literally happened to them last year. If they do, we got a lot of questions about that Ron Roberts hire and what the linebackers really look like. I think they beat UCF. I think they're 4-1 at this point. Now, they go on the road to Tennessee, and I know I told you earlier, Tennessee is not an automatic loss, but I do think it is a loss. I think that's going to be a really tough one for Florida to go on the road and pick up a win in. I think Tennessee is just more talented at this point. I think going on the road has been an Achilles heel for the Gators as well. Maybe they get that solved this year. Maybe they get that fixed this year. Their road schedule is tough with at Tennessee, at Texas, at FSU. We talked about Mississippi State. I think that they do get the win against Mississippi State, but I think they lose at Tennessee. It gets really tough from there. At this point, what are they, 4-2? And they are desperately needing another win. Last year in this situation, about 7 games done, they didn't win another game the rest of the way. Kentucky, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State, can they pick up more wins out of that grouping? We'll talk about that as soon as we hear a quick word from BetUS.
Michael Vick at BetUS.com. Catch an incredible 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits, plus 10% gambler's insurance. BetUS, my online sportsbook and casino.
Kentucky has weirdly owned Florida here recently, but I don't think they do in this one. I think Florida does get the win. I'm not sold on Kentucky's quarterback situation. I'm not sold on just the talent overall. I know they ran for about 4 billion yards last year, and they had about 400 broken tackles, which broken tackles seem like they're popping their head back up in Gainesville at fall practice and scrimmages and things. But it's something about this game tells me that Florida gets the win. I think they're different in the Swamp. I think that Mertz will have a good day against a not very good UK defense. And I think Florida gets their 5th win. Over-under at BetUS right now is 4.5 wins. Now, the juice is tilted towards the over side, but I think here's your win number 5. I think they cover the over. I think this game, and the ones we mentioned, Samford, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, UCF, and then Kentucky, I think that could save Napier's job. I think that 5-2 at this point, with losses to Miami and Tennessee, 2 top 20 teams, I think that being 5-2 right now with 5 games to go, it could save Napier's season. His job. I'm sorry. Not saying it does. I think how you look in these last 5 games is going to matter. But I don't think that the results of many of these games are going to impact what happens with Napier. It's tough for me to tell you that 5-7 and he's not getting fired, but I think that by winning the 5th game, I think he probably is safe unless there's just a ton of blowouts down the stretch, which I don't necessarily expect. Next week at UGA, I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on this, but I think they lose to UGA. I don't think they have a great shot in this game. I don't think they're close talent-wise. I don't think they're close coaching-wise. I think UGA gets that win and gets it pretty easily. At Texas right after, man, nothing like having to play the 2 of the better teams in the conference back-to-back weeks. I think at Texas they're in trouble. I don't think they can stop Quinn Ewers. I don't think they can stop. I think Texas' defense will feast. I think that Texas wins this kind of going away, maybe by 14-ish, and they pick up their 4th loss of the year. Again, they're 5-4 at this point. LSU, to me, is the best chance for a win down the stretch. I think that Florida could certainly win this game. It's tough to project exactly what LSU will look like, but Florida kind of stayed in the game against Jaden Daniels. And so you take that away and certainly think that Florida could have a chance to win this. I just think it at this point is starting to snowball, and LSU does pick up the win. I think it's also tough that in the month of November they have to play 5 straight games. There's no bye week in the month of November. That's going to be tough. I could see Florida being a little banged up here against LSU. I think LSU gets the win as well. Ole Miss, it doesn't get any easier. Ole Miss, one of the better offenses in college football. If they're healthy, I think Ole Miss comes into the swamp. I think it's going to mean a lot to Lane Kiffin. I think Florida can kind of match them like they did LSU last year, and like they really have LSU the last couple of years. But I think when it's all said and done, Ole Miss's offense is just a little too much for them, and they won't be able to get it. They get their 6th loss, and they have to go to Florida State with bowl eligibility on the line. And at this point, I'm going to take Florida State. I think that, Mike Norvell kind of showed that even with a backup quarterback, he was able to go in the swamp and win by double digits. I know Florida had a backup as well, a backup who had looked pretty good against Missouri, got exposed and shut down against Florida State. I think Florida State is 10-ish point favorite right now on most sites and probably maintains that after a pretty good year. I know there's questions about DJ Uiagalelei and what he would look like and matchup against Graham Mertz, this, that, and the other. If Florida has lost 4 games straight and has to go into Doak Campbell Stadium to save their season, I don't really see that going super well for them. I think Florida State, we talked about Miami's front. I think Florida State's defensive line is, if not the best, the second best in the conference. I think their starting 4 is probably the best 4 in the conference, and I think they'll kind of feast on that UF offensive line, which should be pretty beaten up, bruised up, battered up, and not have been very good all year anyway. And so, yeah, I like Florida State to get the win there. Florida drops their last 5 games of the year. I don't think that shocks anybody. They certainly could find a way to win one of those last 3 games, maybe even 2 of them to get to 6, 7 wins. I'm just not willing to predict it just yet. Now, they beat Miami to start out. They go on the road and beat Tennessee. I'll think differently about them in those last 5 games. I know some people like to think that Florida could get to 7, 8 wins this year. I think the path for them to get to 7, 8 wins means they have to start 5-0. They have to beat Miami, Samford, A&M, Mississippi State, and UCF. I don't see any way they beat Tennessee, but they get their 6th win against Kentucky. Georgia and Texas, to me, are automatic losses, so they're 6-3. Maybe you beat LSU because what we talked about, you kept it close with Jaden. Maybe you can keep it even closer with Nussmeier and get the win. That's your 7th win. I find it hard to think they could split with Ole Miss and Florida State, but I guess if you split with Ole Miss and Florida State, however that was, you get to that 8th. I have a hard time seeing Vegas being off by 4 wins here for you to get to 8 instead of 4. Or I guess they're 4.5, so off by 3.5 wins. I think 5, 6 is doable, but I think that more than likely it's going to be 4 or 5, just like Vegas has predicted. I feel like I'm kind of going out on a limb, giving them the A&M win, giving them the Kentucky win. But if they could beat Miami, then I certainly think they could beat any of those other teams like A&M, Kentucky, Tennessee, Miami, is obviously in there too. Maybe LSU, maybe Florida State at the end. But 5 and 7. My hot take though, my bold prediction: Napier doesn't get fired. They keep a lot of these games close. They want to see what he looks like with Lagway at the helm. And this is Mertz's team this year, but they want to see what Lagway looks like, and they don't want Lagway to transfer out. And so I think he gets 2025. If they get to 6 wins, I think he's absolutely guaranteed 2025. If he gets to 5 and 7, I think you end up keeping him. So let me know your thoughts. I try to be fair on this, Gator fans. I need to see it. I need to see them not blow games to Arkansas. I need to see them not blow games to Missouri. I think they beat Florida State if they don't spit in a guy's face and then target the quarterback who was sliding down. So I need to see it before I can, special teams has to get better. Got to beat Kentucky. Until I see that kind of stuff, it's hard for me to predict that they'll be much better. Maybe we get halfway through the year and Florida's 6-0, 6-1, somewhere in there. But until we kind of see it, it's hard to project that they'd be much better than what Vegas is telling you. I've got 5 and 7, so I do have the over. I wouldn't tell you I'm incredibly confident in that, but I'll take 5 and 7. I'll take the over for their win total over at BetUS. Make sure that you go and check out the link in our description. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. I know Gator fans, you're probably not super happy with me, but these are my thoughts. I'm happy to hear about yours down in the comments. We'll talk to you soon here on College Football Addiction.